I never saw it coming. You think you know someone, right? 12 years of marriage, and I was as blind as a bat. It started just like any other day, a regular morning with coffee and the usual kiss goodbye. My wife, Sarah, had that same smile, the one that used to light up my world. Little did I know, beneath that smile was a secret that would turn my life upside down. I'm a straightforward guy, a tech entrepreneur. My life's all about numbers and deals, not secrets and lies. But Sarah, she was different. Lately, she'd been distant, lost in thought. I chalked it up to stress, or maybe the fact that we'd been drifting apart. But never, not even in my wildest dreams, did I suspect she'd rekindle an old flame. It was her first love, a guy from her past who I knew only from her stories. A shadow from a chapter one thought we had long closed. They started seeing each other, thinking they were being discreet. But in a small town like ours, secrets have a way of crawling out of the shadows. One of her friends, Jenna, knew about it. Jenna and I had always been on good terms, and I guess the guilt got to her. She dropped hints, little comments about Sarah being busy or distant. I didn't catch on at first. I was too wrapped up in my work, securing deals and flying out for meetings. Then came the business trip to Chicago, a game changer. There, I bumped into an old college buddy, Mike. We grabbed a beer, and he started talking about his recent divorce. It's the ones you least expect, he said. My wife was having an affair with a guy from her past. Can you believe it? I laughed it off, but his words stuck with me, nagging at the back of my mind. Back home, Sarah was acting stranger than ever. Late night texts, mysterious calls. I started putting the pieces together, but denial's a strong beast. You don't want to believe that the person you trust the most in the world could betray you like that. The affair was getting more reckless. They were meeting in our town, in places where anyone could see them. It was like she wanted to get caught, or maybe she just didn't care anymore. Either way, it was a slap in the face, a wake-up call that I couldn't ignore. One evening, I decided to confront her. Is there something you want to tell me, Sarah? I asked, watching her closely. The way she avoided my gaze, that was all the confirmation I needed. Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. It's not what you think, John, she pleaded. But what else could it be? The love of my life, the woman I built my world around, was living a double life. I felt like a fool, a man who had everything yet saw nothing. It was a bitter pill to swallow, realizing that while I was building our future, she was tearing it down, brick by brick. It wasn't just the affair, it was the betrayal of trust, the shattering of our shared dreams. But life has a way of going on, even when you feel like you're stuck in a nightmare. I had to face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. The question was, what was I going to do about it? In that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. I couldn't ignore the truth staring me in the face. The betrayal was real, and it was time to face it head on. You think you know someone, I muttered to myself as I sat in my dimly lit home office, the glow of the computer screen casting shadows across the room. It had been weeks since the seed of suspicion had been planted in my mind about Sarah, my wife. I was a man of logic, running a successful tech firm, but here I was, grappling with a gut feeling that something was terribly amiss in my marriage. Sarah's behavior had changed subtle at first, but now glaringly obvious. She started working late, her phone perpetually glued to her hand, and her laughter, once my favorite melody, now seemed forced, even foreign. I noticed her new habit of glancing nervously at her phone, and then quickly putting it away whenever I entered the room. The woman I had loved and trusted for over a decade was slipping away, replaced by a stranger with secrets. One day, I decided to follow her. I saw her meet a man at a downtown cafe, their body language unmistakably intimate. The sight felt like a punch to the gut. That's when I knew I needed concrete proof, something undeniable. I couldn't confront her based on a hunch, I needed facts. So, I did what any rational, desperate husband would do. I hired a private investigator. I chose a seasoned pie with a reputation for discretion. I need to know the truth, I told him, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. He nodded, understanding the assignment without needing the messy details. The waiting was the hardest part, knowing that someone was out there, gathering evidence of my crumbling marriage while I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Days turned into weeks, and finally, the pie called. "I have something you need to see," he said gravely. We met at a nondescript cafe, away from prying eyes. He slid an envelope across the table, and my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photos Sarah and that man, laughing, touching, kissing. It was like watching a movie of my life where I wasn't the leading man. The pie also handed me a detailed report of their meetings, places, times, the cold, hard facts that shattered the illusion of my marriage. I felt a strange mix of devastation and relief. Devastation because my worst fears were confirmed, and relief because I finally knew the truth. The drive home was a blur. I sat in my car, parked in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel, trying to process it all. How do we get here? Where did I go wrong? That night, as I lay in bed next to Sarah, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't confront her yet, not until I had a plan. But I couldn't continue living this lie either. The next morning, I woke up early, the decision made. It was time to take control of my life again, to step out of the shadows of doubt and into the harsh light of reality. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I couldn't live in the darkness of deception any longer. The truth had been revealed, and now it was time to act. It was the kind of moment you think you're prepared for, but when it hits, it knocks the wind out of you. That's how I felt, standing in our living room, the evidence of Sarah's affair clutched in my hand. I remember the way the morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room where we'd shared so many memories. It was surreal, confronting the woman I'd loved for years with photos of her betrayal. "Sarah, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. She looked up, a flicker of unease crossing her face. I laid the photos out on the coffee table, watching her eyes dart from one picture to another. Denial was written all over her face. "It's not what it looks like, John," she stammered, her words a feeble attempt to mask the truth. But the pictures said it all, her and that man, in a world of their own, oblivious to the pain they were causing. The conversation spiraled quickly. Her denials clashed against my demand for the truth. I realized then that the woman I thought I knew was a stranger. The trust that had been the foundation of our marriage crumbled under the weight of her lies. I didn't wait for her to come clean. The decision to file for divorce was painful but necessary. I remember the shock on her face when I told her. It was as if she never believed her actions would have real consequences. But they did, and our marriage was the price. The news spread like wildfire. Our small community, once a place of comfort, became a breeding ground for whispers and rumors. I could feel the judgmental glares and hushed conversations as I walked down the street. Sarah, once a respected member of our circle, now faced the harsh reality of her choices. Her social standing, something she had always valued, crumbled as the truth came to light. The divorce proceedings were brutal. As we sat in that sterile lawyer's office, going through the motions, it felt like I was in a bad dream. The revelation of the affair hit our families like a tidal wave. Her parents, who had treated me like a son, were devastated. My family, equally blindsided, rallied around me, their support unwavering but tinged with disappointment and anger. It's strange how life can change in an instant. The woman I had built a life with, shared dreams with, was now on the other side of a chasm that kept widening with every legal document and every revealed secret. We were strangers, connected only by the remnants of a relationship that had once meant everything to me. As I walked out of the lawyer's office that day, I realized that this was more than just the end of a marriage. It was the end of the life I had known, the shattering of a trust one thought was unbreakable. But amidst the ruins, I found a resolve I didn't know I had. The road ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly difficult, but I was ready to face it head on, to rebuild my life from the ashes of what used to be. The truth, no matter how painful, had set me free. They say divorce is like going through a war. Well, they're not wrong. There I was, sitting across from my lawyer, James, a shrewd man who'd seen more battles in the courtroom than most. We were discussing strategy, every detail of the divorce proceedings laid out like a chess game. It was cold, calculated, and necessary. I'd come to realize that the woman I was divorcing, Sarah, wasn't the woman I married. She becomes someone else, someone willing to do anything to get her way. That's why I wasn't surprised when she tried to use her old tricks on me, the seduction tactics that once worked. But this time, I was immune to her charms. The love I had for her was replaced by a resolve to see this through, to fight for what was rightfully mine. Meanwhile, her lover, the man who'd helped unravel my marriage, got cold feet, scared of the exposure, of his life turning upside down like mine had. He cut ties with Sarah. She was left alone, abandoned by the one person she thought she could rely on. It was a cruel twist of fate, watching her experience the betrayal she'd inflicted on me. Sarah's desperation grew. She called, send messages, try to talk to me face to face. But I was done. My focus was solely on the legal battle, on protecting what I'd worked so hard for all these years. I saw her unravel, her composure slipping, the facade of the confident woman I once knew crumbling away. It was both sad and strangely satisfying to see her realize that her actions had consequences. James, ever the tactician, capitalized on every mistake Sarah made. He was relentless, ensuring that the settlement was fair, but certainly not in her favor. We pored over financial statements, property deeds, everything that we could use to strengthen our case. It was exhausting, mentally and emotionally, but I knew it was necessary. During this time, I often found myself reflecting on the past, on how we got to this point. It's funny how life works. One day you're planning your future with someone, in the next, you're strategizing on how to separate your lives. But I also realized that this was a chance for a new beginning, a clean slate to rebuild my life, my way. As the divorce proceedings drew to a close, I felt a sense of relief. It was almost over, this chapter of my life that had caused so much pain and turmoil. I was ready to move forward, to leave the past and its shadows behind. Sarah, once the center of my world, had become a stranger, a lesson learned the hard way. The final gavel hadn't yet sounded, but I was already looking ahead, to a future where the webs of deceit and betrayal had no place. You can't always get what you want. Mick Jagger sure got that right. There I was, standing outside the courthouse, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over me. Today marked a significant victory in the courtroom, one that felt like a small semblance of justice in the chaos that my life had become. The judge had just rolled in my favor, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Sarah's demands, which were nothing short of astronomical, were denied. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about fairness, about not letting her walk away with everything while leaving me with nothing but memories of betrayal. The fallout from our split was like ripples in a pond, affecting everyone around us. My family, who had once embraced Sarah as one of their own, now looked at her with a mix of sadness and disdain. It was a tough pill for them to swallow, seeing the woman they loved and trusted turn into someone they could hardly recognize. Family gatherings, once filled with laughter and warmth, now had an undercurrent of tension, unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Friends, too, began picking sides. It's strange how a crisis reveals true loyalties. Most of our mutual friends leaned towards me, their sympathies clear in their words and actions. I guess they saw what I couldn't, the changes in Sarah, the slow unraveling of our life together. A few stayed neutral, but even they looked at Sarah differently, their greetings a little more reserved, their smiles a bit forced. But the real kicker was how all this mess spilled over into Sarah's professional life. She had always been ambitious, real go-getter in her field. But as the scandal of our divorce spread, her career started to take hits. I heard through the grapevine that clients were backing out, uncomfortable with the negative publicity. Colleagues who once sang her praises were now whispering in the corners. Her once bright career trajectory had taken a nosedive, a casualty of the choices she'd made. As I walked away from the courthouse, I couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically our lives had changed. Sarah, once the epitome of success and charm, was now grappling with the consequences of her actions. And me? I was starting to rebuild, piece by piece. The victory in court wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was a stepping stone towards reclaiming my life, towards a future that, just a few months ago, seemed unimaginable. It's funny how life works out sometimes. You go through hell, thinking you'll never come out the other side. But then you do, and you realize that you're stronger than you ever thought possible. The road ahead was still unclear, but one thing was certain. I was moving forward, leaving the past and its pain behind. Every cloud has a silver lining, they say. Well, I found mine in the most unexpected way. After months of grueling legal battles and emotional turmoil, I decided to offer Sarah a settlement. It was a calculated move, one that might have seemed too generous at first glance. But here's the thing in the fine print. There was a clause that worked in my favor. I knew Sarah. Once upon a time, I knew her better than anyone. I knew she'd jump at the chance of a seemingly favorable settlement without delving too deep. And just like clockwork, she took the bait, signing off on the agreement without her lawyer combing through the details. It was a risky play, but it paid off. The day the divorce was finalized felt surreal. The settlement left Sarah with far less than she expected. It wasn't about the money, though. It was about closing a chapter, about setting things right in my own way. As I walked out of the courthouse, the final decree in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The storm had passed, and in its wake, I found a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. In the aftermath, something remarkable happened. My life, which had been in shambles, began to piece itself back together. My network, both professional and personal, rallied around me. Friends and colleagues who had watched the saga unfold now extended their support and sympathy. It's strange how adversity can bring people closer, how shared struggles can forge stronger bonds. My business, which had taken a back seat during the divorce, started to thrive again. I poured my energy into it, finding solace in the familiar rhythm of work. Deals that had been put on hold were now back on the table, and new opportunities started to emerge. It was as if the universe was giving me a nod, a sign that I was on the right path. But it wasn't just about business. This ordeal had changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I found myself reaching out to old friends, rekindling relationships I neglected. I started to appreciate the simple things: a quiet evening at home, a good book, a long walk. I even took up cooking, something Sarah always loved and I never quite got the hang of. In a way, it was therapeutic, a process of rediscovering parts of myself that I'd lost along the way. As for Sarah, our paths diverged completely. The last I heard, she was trying to pick up the pieces of her life, but we were in different worlds now. There was no anger or bitterness left in me, just a sense of closure, a feeling of moving on from a chapter that was never meant to be. Looking back, I realized that this journey, as painful as it was, led me to a better place. I emerged stronger, more resilient, and with a clearer sense of who I am and what I want in life. It's a new dawn, a fresh start, and I'm ready to embrace whatever comes next with open arms and a hopeful heart. Life's funny, isn't it? How it can take two people who were once so close and send them spiraling in completely opposite directions. That's what happened with Sarah and me. While my life was taking a turn for the better, hers, well, it was like watching a slow-motion train wreck. After the divorce, Sarah tried to reconnect with our old friends, maybe to find some solace or just to feel normal again. But things had changed. Those friends, who had been like family to us, now gave her the cold shoulder. It was painful to watch, even for me. The vibrant social life she once boasted about had vanished, leaving her more isolated than ever. Her financial troubles didn't help either. The settlement, which she thought was a windfall, turned out to be less than she'd hoped for. I heard through the grapevine that she was struggling to make ends meet, her lavish lifestyle a thing of the past. It was a harsh dose of reality for someone who'd always lived in the fast lane. In a desperate move, Sarah decided to sell her story to the media. Maybe she thought playing the victim would garner some sympathy, maybe even a lucrative deal. But it backfired spectacularly. The coverage painted her in a negative light, and public opinion, which can be fickle at best, turned against her. Meanwhile, my career was on an upswing. I landed a promotion, one I'd been gunning for, even before our marriage fell apart. It was a sweet moment, a testament to the hard work and long hours I'd put in. But it also felt like a vindication, a sign that life was finally looking up for me. Sarah, on the other hand, tried to fill the void by jumping into a new relationship. I guess she was looking for support, or maybe just trying to escape her loneliness. It didn't last long, though. The relationship ended almost as quickly as it began. and she was back to square one, alone and struggling to cope. That's when her mental health started to take a hit. The stress of her crumbling social life, financial woes, and loneliness began to wear her down. I could see the change even from a distance. She wasn't the same confident, outgoing woman I once knew. Her job performance began to suffer too. The woman who prided herself on her career was now struggling to keep up. It wasn't long before her employer took notice. Between her declining work and the negative publicity surrounding her, she was let go. Another blow in a series of unfortunate events that seemed to be piling up against her. As I watched all this unfold, I couldn't help but feel a pang of, what? Pity? Regret? I'm not sure. It was hard to reconcile the woman she had become with the Sarah I once loved. Our lives, once so intertwined, were now worlds apart. It was a sobering reminder of how quickly fortunes can change, how the choices we make can set us on paths we never expected to walk. While I was experiencing a resurgence, Sarah was facing a downfall. It was a tale of two lives, diverging from a shared path into two very different journeys. As I settled into my new role, with new responsibilities and challenges, I couldn't shake the thought of Sarah and how drastically our lives had diverged. It was a bittersweet realization that sometimes, in order to find your own way, you have to let go of someone who was once an integral part of your journey. You know how they say life can turn on a dime? Well, mine did a complete 180. Just when I thought I'd seen it all, life threw a few more curveballs for both me and Sarah. As I moved forward, rebuilding and reshaping my life, Sarah's world seemed to spiral further out of control. The first shock came when I heard Sarah had started selling her possessions. The designer clothes, the flashy jewelry, even some of her cherished art pieces, all gone. It was a drastic shift from the lavish lifestyle she once flaunted. Watching her sell off pieces of the life we once shared felt surreal, like observing the final chapters of a book I was no longer a part of. Meanwhile, my life took a positive turn. I found love again, something I didn't think was possible after everything that had happened. Her name was Emily, and she brought a sense of peace and happiness that had been missing from my life for too long. Our wedding was a simple affair, nothing like the extravagant event Sarah and I had years ago. It was a new chapter, a fresh start with someone who shared my values and outlook on life. When Sarah found out about the wedding, I heard through mutual friends that it hit her hard. It must have been a blow to see me moving on, building a new life with someone else. But what happened next surprised even me. Sarah reached out, asking to meet. She wanted to talk, maybe even reconcile. But for me, that chapter was closed. I met her, out of a sense of closure more than anything else, and I told her in no uncertain terms that there was no going back. We were two very different people now, walking two very different paths. As if her situation wasn't bad enough, creditors started coming after her for unpaid debts. It was like watching a slow-motion collapse. The financial empire she tried to maintain post-divorce was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The reality of her situation was harsh, and it seemed like every day brought a new challenge. The final straw came when she had to move out of the house we once shared. She moved into a small, modest apartment, a far cry from the luxurious home we'd once inhabited. It was a stark reminder of how much had changed, of how the choices we make can have lasting repercussions. As I settled into married life with Emily, I couldn't help but reflect on the stark contrast between our lives. Here I was, starting over, finding happiness in the simplest things, while Sarah was fighting to keep her head above water. It was a bittersweet realization. On one hand, I was grateful for the new beginning I'd been given. On the other, I couldn't completely shake off the sadness for the life Sarah had lost. Life is unpredictable, filled with ups and downs, twists and turns. My journey had taken me to a place of contentment and stability, while Sarah's had led her down a path of struggle and uncertainty. It was a poignant reminder of how quickly things can change, and how the decisions we make shape our lives in ways we can never fully anticipate.